Welcome to Your Texas Land, a place where we delve deep into all things related to land in Texas. I'm your host, David Riley, and I'm honored to have you join us today. In each episode, we explore topics that might affect you as a landowner here in Texas. Today, I'm joined by Kyndal Anderson of Plateau Land Wildlife Management, and we're going to be talking through the ins and outs of being a wildlife biologist. Thank you for joining us here today, Kyndal.
Hey, David. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited. It's always good to sit down and do this face-to-face because we don't live by each other anymore, so I don't get to see you a lot.
For sure.
Yeah, so this is cool. Kind of weird, though. I got this mic. I'm a little nervous, not going to lie, so.
No reason to be nervous. This is just a conversation that me and you are going to have, and we're going to walk through walk through about being a wildlife biologist. We've both been in the field for quite some time now. Mm-hmm. It's kind of strange that I still feel like I'm a young biologist right out of college.
I know.
Coming into this.
What happened?
Yeah, but time passes really quick, and then now we're working through being here. I've been here almost 10 years, and how long have you been at Plateau?
I've been here for 14 years, which is bonkers when I think about it, and I just don't know when I got that old, you know? It's been a while.
For sure. So let's walk through a little bit of the history of you before Plateau. Where were you born and raised? Where did that all come?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in San Marcos. So I'm from the Texas Hill Country. This is my home. And I didn't stray too far from it when I went off to college. So everything is kind of either started here or brought me back to here. So Texas, born and bred.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And now, correct me if I'm wrong here, y'all got some family land or some family land in Three Rivers?
Yeah, so my mom and dad, my senior year of college, and kind of right after that, they moved away from like my childhood home, which I can tell you about, but down to Three Rivers. So now they're South Texas people, which is always cool to kind of get to make that drive down to visit and see different scenery and all of that. But we grew up on like probably a little 10-acre tract of land in San Marcos, and it was just kind of juniper oak woodland, kind of nestled at the base of two hilltops. So we had a wet weather creek that ran through it, and I think that property as a kid was kind of my gateway into the natural world. Growing up, we didn't do like a ton of outdoor recreating. Like we didn't really camp a lot or hike a lot. You know this about me, but like our listeners probably don't know that I'm extremely tenderhearted about animals, like domestic and wild. My dad did some hunting, and I think he always wanted a daughter that would go and like shoot stuff with him. And I was not that girl. I cried. So I didn't grow up hunting, like I think is a common story you hear with anyone in my background. But I did grow up fishing a lot. So we grew up on the water, fresh water. My dad fishes still to this day. He fishes every single day. He's retired now. And I still fish a lot, but like if you're coming at me for tips and tricks, I'm not your girl because I'm terrible at it. I never catch anything. So that was sort of like my world into kind of the natural land. I think what that property growing up did for me was it opened the door for, as kind of a more awkward kid or like a kid that didn't really want to like socialize with other kids. It gave me that like solitude I was seeking and needing. I have two younger sisters who are far more outgoing and like engaged, and social than I am. So the woods behind my house were really kind of that world that I needed. It also gave me an opportunity to realize that there's so much to learn. Like nature is captivating and complex and mysterious. And as a kid, when you're kind of out there doing your thing by yourself in the woods, you experience that firsthand. So I think that was probably like that opening that shoved me into, okay, I want more of this.
For sure. Yeah. I can remember as a kid, walking around out in the woods or something and seeing a plant that I didn't know what it was. And this is not thinking from scientifically, but just like, hey, that's really cool looking.
Yeah. What is that
and
weird thing?
It just kind of drives you to go, hey, I want to learn more about that. And really not even realizing at the time that's something that would be a future career, would
Right.
be something that we would do.
Yeah, you don't know that at 10 years old.
No, not at all. So I think that's what makes it fun and interesting.
Yeah.
So San Marcos, Three Rivers, and then from there we go to college.
Yeah, Texas A&M. So I'm an Aggie. I went off to A&M and I got my degree in, at the time, it was wildlife and fishery science. And I don't know if when you were there, if they did it this way, but we were asked to select like an emphasis or a kind of focus area, and mine was museums and natural collections. So that was my degree program at A&M.
Cool. Yeah, no, they still, when I was there, it was still WFSC, Wildlife Fishery Sciences. We had the same emphasis. I did wildlife ecology.
Okay.
And since then it's changed. It's now
Yeah, what is
Rangeland Wildlife Fisheries Management, so
Okay.
RWFM. They've kind of brought in that rangeland side of things to the wildlife side, which I think is great. That's a great opportunity for them to get students more engaged in the rangeland, the plant side of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is really important. I think you would
that
agree
was,
with.
Right. And honestly, that's good that they do that, because I felt like when I was coming into this space, plants, or really specifically grasses, herbaceous layer, that for some reason was like my weak area as far as field knowledge. And I didn't have a class. I didn't take a class in it, like range grasses or something like that. But I've always felt sort of crippled by that a little bit. So it's kind of cool that they're focusing on it now.
Well, I think it makes from a landowner perspective, we visited with a lot of landowners throughout the state of Texas. That's usually one of the first questions that I get when I get out of the truck or I get out
What's
of the
this
car
grass?
is, what is this? And
It's almost always little blue stem.
for sure. Yeah. It's usually the same thing.
grass
However,
over and over again.
there's been plenty of times where I've been stumped. I'll be the first to admit I'm not a plant nerd. We've got several of those that work for Plateau that are really good at it. Our CEO being one of them.
Yeah.
And they're really good at plants, and I'm not. So I tell a lot of landowners that know your plants, but if you can't know your plants, at least know how to figure out what they are.
Yeah, or how to-
So I've got really good at utilizing a grass book or utilizing different things to figure out what they are. iNaturalist has been a lifesaver for me.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. How to take a photo of a grass so that you can put it in iNaturalist.
For sure. Doing those kind of
It'll do the
things
work.
make it a lot easier for you. To do those. So you said your emphasis was on museum and collections. Was there a thought of where you wanted to go with that during school?
Yeah, so maybe there was an absence of thought, I think, because going in as like an 18, 19-year-old person and you're suddenly asked to pick a career path for the remainder of your life, that's a big ask when you're that young. And I didn't grow up with wildlife biologists like in my circle, right? I didn't know anyone who did that job. I knew it was a position because why would there be a degree program for it, right? But I didn't know what that looked like. And in my head, everything I knew was centered around Texas, right? It's my family's here, my friends are here, my knowledge is here. And I just thought maybe that field work was the only real way into this field, and that I would be like on some sort of mountainside in Montana tracking some sort of animal for 3 months of my life. And that was scary, right? I was thinking, I don't want to do that. I want to stay close to my home and what I know and feel comfortable with. So I kind of always thought that maybe I would be in some sort of field of education, like nature education, or maybe I would just be at a lab bench or doing some sort of research. To be honest, I find myself doing field work now. I never wanted to do field work when I first started. I didn't think that was for me. So, that was why I picked museums and natural collections. That's the short story of it.
For sure, yeah. We've got a little bit of a tie there to each other with museum and natural collections. During school, I was working at I think it's called the BRTC now, Biodiversity Research and Teaching Collections at A&M.
Yeah.
So I've got a little bit of that background as well of how to stuff birds, how to stuff mammals.
Yeah, that was a fun part of certain like lab portions of coursework was, messing around with stuff in the jars and
oh, for sure.
the drawers.
There was definitely times throughout my college career that I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to Smithsonian. I'm going to sit behind a desk and I'm going to do this all day long.
Yeah, the smell of formaldehyde that never leaves your clothing and skin. Like the more time you spend in these lab portions.
For sure. Well, cool. Well, then so A&M, graduate from A&M, and then the path to Plateau from there. What did that look like?
Right. So pretty traditional in terms of it's graduation time. What am I going to do after? I need a job. And honestly, I was really excited to, like, I love to learn, but the classroom setting for me is stressful, and I have a lot of anxiety around performance, like testing and things like that. That has always just been a thing for me. So while I love to learn, I was really ready to get out into the world and like put that knowledge to the test in a way that I wasn't going to like receive a pass fail, right? So except it is a real life pass fail, because if you fail, that's your whole career.
Yeah.
So I was looking for a job, and I kind of learned pretty quickly that jobs in this field are on the limited side. At least they were when I was fresh coming out of graduation. So I ended up having to apply to like other states, and that was terrifying to me. I was like, what? I might move to Colorado or something like that. And so I applied all over to a bunch of different positions and just didn't get, like, I'd have a phone interview. I didn't get really any bites. Wouldn't hear back from some places, and it was kind of disheartening. And then one day I was looking at the A&M job board and saw that there was a, at the time we called it junior biologist, which we've improved our like titles now. But it was a junior biologist position with Plateau Land and Wildlife out of Dripping Springs. I had never heard of Plateau. I knew what TPWD did, Texas Parks and Wildlife, working with private landowners, but I didn't realize that there was like a counterpart to that, a whole business that did something similar, but just as a for-profit rather than a nonprofit, right? And so I took that opportunity to apply for that job, and I got a call back. I did a couple phone interviews, and then I did come to the office and like sat down with the entire consulting team. I mean, at the time it was smaller. Yeah. Well, it was Shane, Mark, and another couple biologists, and then some of the admins. There were maybe like 6 or 7 people. So believe it or not, it was a lot for, like, we've grown so much since then, but it was a lot. It was everybody, you know, at the time.
No, for sure. No, I know exactly what you mean. My first interview here was with 7 or 8 people.
Yeah,
I think is what we had, and that was terrifying. Right out of school.
100%.
Now looking back on it, it's like, well, that's 7 or 8 people. That's about normal for the amount of people we have now.
Yeah. So sat down with the whole consulting team, and they just asked me a whole bunch of questions about myself and my background and everything like that. And so I really honestly came out of that going, okay, if I got through 3 interviews, like, this is probably it, right? Spoiler alert, I was not hired for that job. They decided to promote from within. So James Hall, right, one of our long-term biologists, great guy. She took my position though. So I didn't get the job. And so I was kind of disheartened at first and was like, now what, right? So I sat around for a minute, and then I received another call from Plateau, and it was Steve Parker, who was the head of our products and services division at the time. He was looking for an admin position. So I would be doing things like annual reports, processing work orders, logs for our field technicians coming in from doing work out in the field on property. And I went through a couple of interviews with him and was hired as that position. So I actually started in the admin world. And then over time, I sort of worked my way kind of through the ranks. I did that for a few years, the admin stuff for a few years. And then I was approached by one of our, I think, field technicians at the time, but there was a need for having some birders added to the team. We were growing in our company. We were servicing more properties and doing more bird survey work. I didn't have a background in birds. I did not take an ornithology class. So when I
wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah.
Like, you do a lot of bird stuff for us now. So I honestly don't think I knew that until just now.
Yeah. So I did not take an ornithology class. I had to teach myself, which maybe there are, pros to that. Maybe there are cons to that. But I just kind of dived right in, and I saw that opportunity to get out in the field and an opportunity to learn something new. And I took it. And so I started doing bird surveys first, and then slowly but surely they just kind of added on more survey work or more field stuff. And eventually I got taken or absorbed, taken's maybe the wrong word, but absorbed by the consulting biology department. And I became an admin for them. So I was helping on the back end of writing and producing the wildlife management plans, taking care of filings, those kinds of things. And then Mark Gray, another a coworker, right, approached me and basically said, we have a need for consulting biology or consulting biologist, and we want you to take that position. This is all you. And I said, I don't think I want that. Um, I'll be honest and just say that the main reason behind that was not because of interest, but because I knew I was going to be having to work with landowners. And the idea of working with people day in and day out in the field kind of scared me a little bit. I knew that I would be the person that questions would be coming to. I would have to have those social interactions. And that worried me a little bit because I tend to be more private and reserved. And I like my alone time in the field.
You can't tell it all. We're here on a podcast. And you're just talking up a storm here. So I think your story there is really a good one. If there's any young listeners out there that are listening to this, any folks that are maybe in college right now, maybe in the wildlife field, not knowing what you're going to do. I think that's a common denominator from most of us. I would consider ourselves still young biologists here, that when we left school, we probably didn't know what we wanted to do.
No.
I know my senior year of college, second senior year, the extra trip around the sun there, I had no clue. I knew I wanted to do something in the wildlife field, but I didn't know if that was going to be off a boat in Florida, looking at dolphins, or going to be working with private landowners in Texas on 1D1 tax valuation. So it's I think that's a common denominator, and I think the take home message there a little bit is get some experience, do whatever it takes to get experience, even if it's something you're not sure if you want to do. It's a great opportunity to learn about it, learn about different career paths. Anytime you're in school, if you've got an opportunity to meet with folks and network with other folks, do it.
Right.
Because that's your opportunity to learn a little bit about everything. And that's where you can kind of maybe set your foot in the sand a little bit and say, this is what I want to do. And this is where I want to go. And then you can work from there with that network that you've created.
Exactly.
And I think it's, I kind of want to also highlight that what you had said, applying to a lot of different places as soon as you walk out of that college. That's very good advice, very good for young listeners that may be going into the career path, the career field here soon. You're going to put a lot of applications out there. You're going to not get a lot of phone calls back sometimes. You're going to get some phone calls back. You're going to do interviews. And you're not going to get the job. So be prepared for that kind of job market and that job market search. As much as I like to think that the wildlife industry is really big and really expansive, especially in school, I felt that way. I've now learned over the past 10, 12 years that it's really not that big. There's a lot of people that know each other. I see the same people at the same conventions, same meetings. So networking with those folks, that can really help in that kind of job search. So with that also, I think also kicking the door open is kind of what you did there. Is you got your foot in the door here at Plateau. And then from there, it just kind of took off and it's became what it has today, which is a good story. Because I think that's kind of the truth behind this field is that's how you kind of get into it. So, well, thank you for sharing that whole story with us. So now kind of jumping into the wildlife biologist side of things, you've been at Plateau, you've wore a lot of different hats at Plateau. Like you said, starting from the admin role all the way up into now being a consulting biologist, meeting with landowners on their property, making recommendations, property tax consulting as well. So you've got a lot of different experiences with landowners. But what is if you can maybe pinpoint one or few things that interest you as being a wildlife biologist, what's the passion kind of thing behind that?
Yeah. So I think the passion behind what I do, or maybe my why for why I'm here in this field, is a lot to do with the appreciation of the open space, right, of land, and kind of connecting back to, I think for me, it's connecting back to something that's bigger than myself and realizing that even a small footprint or a small impact is something that is benefiting land that's there for the future, right? For future generations. So the work I'm doing now with landowners to help educate them about their land, help to build a strong plan for their property to match not only their landowner goals, but also the need of that land and make it something better, is not just impacting me in a sense that I get to help somebody. And that's really where a lot of the joy comes in. But to help this family provide for this land and provide something for their future generations as well. I mean, our state is 95% privately owned. So, another one of the cool things that I think if you asked any field biologist of like, what do you enjoy about your job? It's the cool factor, right? I get to see things every week that just blow my mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I also get to see land that is privately held. So meaning it's not a state park. It's not something that everybody's recreating on.
You might be the first person that's seen that in decades.
Yeah.
Potentially even centuries.
Yeah.
And you might be the only person to see it the next decade or the next century, which is really cool. I actually said that to some young students at A&M this past week, that's probably the coolest part of our job, is that sometimes we get to go places that no one's ever going to get to see again, or maybe very limited for people to get to see. And I think that's just cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's like the interest or the passion behind what we do, why we do what we do. But I think that the cool factor is there, and maybe the rewarding factor is that I get to help somebody, I get to educate somebody, so that it's kind of that concept of leave something better than you found it, right? Leave a landowner more prepared, more educated, more ready to tackle a project than before.
So a common theme I find in what you're saying there, and I like to say this to a lot of folks, we're really not in the wildlife business. We're in the people business.
We're in the people business.
Yes. We talk with a lot of people.
As an introvert, that's sometimes
that can be difficult. That can
not
be difficult.
The easiest.
For sure. But that's the truth behind it, because we are so, we're in a state that is so privately owned. A lot of our job as a wildlife biologist is having the understanding of good management practices, having the understanding of some of our species throughout the state. We've got to have that educational background, but a lot of that is teaching other folks that, which I think is what makes what you had said, like maybe going into an educational background or something like that, or educational career here in college. I think that plays out on a daily basis for us. That's what our job is when we go to a property, is to educate that landowner, motivate that landowner, so that they're excited to do these things. And then most of the time, that's not an issue. Most landowners, when you show up, are already motivated. They want to do it. But it's just kind of helping channel some of that passion and can be pushing it in the right direction to do what they want to do, their goals and their objectives for their property.
Yeah, agreed. I think that it was kind of irony that I ended up picking a route in school that was maybe focused on education. Then I found myself doing something opposite, right, in the field work. But in the end, I still ended up in education. Yeah, I'm educating landowners.
For sure. Yeah. It's you're not sitting in a classroom teaching a bunch of people, but your classroom's outside, and that's a much more fun classroom.
Yeah.
Cool. So what are some common things? Like I said, you meet with landowners almost on a daily basis at this point. What are some common misconceptions? What are some common questions that you get? I mean, this is going to be a very broad topic, so we can kind of work around it. But common misconceptions, common questions that you get from landowners when you visit their property, and it doesn't necessarily have to be 1-to-1 related. I'm sure there are several of those. We've probably talked about them on this podcast before. But what are some of those things that you get from landowners the first time you meet with them about wildlife management? Yeah,
I think one of the common, maybe misunderstandings or misconceptions that I hear a lot from landowners is that wildlife management or managing your property has to be hard. It's got to be full of these big projects, and that bigger is better or more is better. I don't think that that's always true. I think that there's something to be said for landowners who are have a clear property goal in mind, but who are willing to work within their own boundaries, right? Maybe that boundary is the amount of time that you have to spend on the property. You work a full-time job in another city. You're not oftentimes out there. So how much time do you really have to do all of this stuff? What is your budget for your property, right? Some of these practices are expensive, take months and months to complete, years to complete, that kind of thing. So what are your limiting factors? Where are your interests? And then also, what does the property need, right? All of these things are taken into consideration when I work with someone in the field. And I think that sometimes when I meet with people that are like newer landowners, they have this idea that they're like gung-ho about something. I'm going to change my whole property. I'm going to remove all of the cedar out of there. I'm going to mow it, keep it mowed down, make it look like a city park, right? That's aesthetically pleasing to me as a landowner. And I have to take the time to re-educate them, and that having that diversity pulled out of that property is not doing service to the land. It's not servicing wildlife either, right? So having some of that remain in place is benefiting the land more so than removing it, because you might think that it looks a little bit nicer, right? And so there's an education factor that goes into that. Bigger is not always better. There are activities that are small, may seem very small, and they're having just as much impact to native wildlife or to your property. I mean, it can be as simple as putting up supplemental cavity boxes for nesting songbirds, right? It could be keeping a grain feeder filled, or putting out just a manually filled water source or rainwater collection for wildlife. These are very simplistic, simple actions that benefit everything on land. It doesn't have to be this massive overhaul, build a pond, mass clear a property. There's a lot of different levels that go into it. So I think that's one of the main misconceptions. And I think one of the main questions I get, or one of the common questions I get from landowners, is how long is this going to take? Like, how long will it take before I see birds come to my feeder, or I find a nest in my nesting box, or I see my pasture come back to life and the native species come back? And that's a really hard question to answer. And to be truthful, the answer to that is not black and white. There's not really an answer. I think the answer to that question is patience. But every property is different. Every landowner's goals are different.
It depends. That's one of my favorite answers to that question, because it's very difficult to give that, because you don't know. A lot of it is, there's so many variables in everything we talk about, everything we do, that there's never going to be a definitive answer.
No.
But patience is a very good virtue to have if you're going to be managing a property, because you're going to need it, because you never know what's going to happen.
Right. There's patience, and then also sticking with it, right? So if you're like reseeding your pasture and you're waiting for those grasses to germinate and come back up, and you want to see that native component again, don't give up, right? It may not happen for you in the first 1 to 2 years, or you're waiting for your pasture to come back after decades of overgrazing. That takes time. It will happen because nature makes a way, right? But it's probably not going to be immediately obvious to you. And it may be a gradual change over time. But there will be one day that you're driving through your property and you're like, oh, I've never seen it in this light before.
For sure.
There's a difference here.
For sure. Shane and I were, funnily you said that, Shane, and I were just talking about that less than an hour ago, about a property that we've been on for several years, and a reseeding project was done, and it took 5 years.
Yeah.
For things to start showing up. And there was some drought involved in there. We had some really good rains this past spring, and it really started to flourish this year, but it took a little time, and that can be hard. That can be a really hard thing, especially when you start looking at it from a financial perspective. You put in some of your budget to do that, and it just doesn't happen right away. And that's sometimes a hard pill to swallow as a landowner, that, hey, it's going to take some time. It'll all work out. It's just, we got to go through this process. Yeah.
I think also remembering that no effort is wasted, right? So even if you don't get fruit from that labor that you can see, maybe you learn something that, hey, this reseeding method doesn't work for my land, or this brush management, I accidentally mowed down a whole bunch of prickly pear and then it came back way more aggressively. Ooh, I learned a lesson.
For sure.
You got to get the whole thing out.
For sure. And I want to go back to something you said previously. You were talking about a lot of landowners, they're really motivated. They're really excited to do stuff. And I think one of my big pieces of advice, and this isn't a sales pitch for Plateau, it can be, if you want to work with us. But I think one of the most important things for a landowner to do is to meet with a biologist, be that us, be that Texas Parks and Wildlife, be that somebody.
Yeah.
Before they really delve too deep into their management. I know I've seen it. You've probably came across it before where you've got some mismanagement that happens prior to talking to somebody.
Yeah, it's
and
the
it can
worst.
really affect future management, and sometimes it can set you back a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's an easy way to lose motivation to continue doing it, and those kind of things. I think that's one of the biggest things I can tell landowners is just talk with a professional, talk with someone that does this for a living, just to get some ideas. Doesn't mean you have to take everything. It doesn't mean you can't talk to multiple folks, but please do that because I think that's really important. Just to understand what your goals are, and again, there's a lot of misconceptions out there about wildlife management and what you need to do, and if you don't take that little step, sometimes you can set yourself back worse. And a lot of times, and I think I've recommended this to landowners over the years, sometimes no management for a period of time is good management.
Right.
Just sit back and watch what happens a little bit there.
Yeah.
I know I've recommended that in riparian areas where folks have been maybe doing something and just say, hey, just let it grow.
Yeah, cool your jets.
See what happens. Yeah, see what happens here. And a lot of times you get a phone call 6-8 months later, like, wow, it's really changed. Like, yeah, yeah, you got to stop managing it a little bit.
Yeah, I think also, it's common. I'll see landowners, like I said, kind of right out the gate, they want to tackle everything all at once, right? And then they find themselves burning out, right? Going down in flames. And they're like, I did so much in one calendar year. Like I went through my whole budget. I did all this labor. I've spent all of my weekends out here, and like my passion and joy for this property has started to flame out a little bit. And that's a recommendation to landowners, is figure out a way that you are enjoying your property and you're not losing your passion for being out there and doing the work and the hard stuff. So that's important. That's what I try to talk to people about when I get to meet them in the field. But yeah, going back to your point of sometimes that stuff has already occurred on land, and I do not want to tell anybody, hey, you probably should have done this differently. Nobody wants to say like this did some damage. I don't want to have that conversation with people.
It's an unfortunate conversation.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to have.
It comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that I think can be avoided.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of my hope here, is that maybe someone listening to this is going, okay, well, I'm going to call a biologist.
Yeah, maybe.
Be that us, be that TPWD.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hopeful for.
Maybe I shouldn't buy a whole bobcat.
Yeah.
Just
and just
go at it.
and just go to town on it. Maybe I should think about what I'm trying to do here and my goals in the future, and talk to somebody about it, because I think that's where a lot of mistakes happen, is at the front end of it. And then from there, it usually, and it's a learning process. You're going to learn something every single time you do something. That happens on our property, our family property, daily.
Yep.
We learn something new about a piece of machinery, or something new about the grasses, or something that's going on. And that's just part of the whole management perspective of things. So.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, so I wanted to ask you, you're at Plateau for 14 years. You've been out in the field for 5-6 years-ish, maybe more than that, with bird surveys and stuff.
More with bird surveys. I mean, I'd say closer to probably 10 years,
Okay.
honestly.
Okay.
Maybe even longer, but doing bird surveys for quite some time.
For sure.
Yeah.
Or early morning bird surveys. That's got to be something that I know the few that I've been on. I'm not a birder here at Plateau. I've definitely been on birding.
You've come with me.
I've came with
Yeah.
you. I went with Mark. I've went with a lot of folks. Still blows my mind how y'all can hear these separate birds when there's about 4,000 of them making a call.
Oh my gosh.
At the same time.
Yeah, dawn chorus is like overstimulation central, like so much happening.
Yes.
And you've got to be ready to go the moment that you get on that property.
Exactly. But with that, I assume that you've had landowners come with you throughout the years, novice birders, people that have no experience actually at all the way up to people that maybe could be doing their own bird survey and
Yeah,
don't need us
are
out
better
there.
than me.
Yeah,
For sure.
So with those experiences with landowners on properties, and maybe not with the landowner, but your experience on properties over time, have you had any fun stories, great experiences?
Yeah.
Things like that you can share that would be fun?
Yeah. So that That's a really good question. It's sometimes I find myself forgetting a lot. Like it's almost like my brain has a certain amount of capacity and I just have to keep replacing stuff to stay current. So thinking back about like all of the things that I've seen and done, I think that one experience that kind of sticks out to me is like a monumental one is, it's a few years back, I was on a property in Travis County and I was conducting an endangered species survey for golden cheek warblers. And if you know much about their habitat where they breed, they tend to be on properties in a select section of our state, right? A very small area in central Texas. There's a couple of outlier areas, but in areas where there's high elevation changes, so we're talking about prominent hilltops, canyonlands, grottos, things like that, and within a woodland that's got a really close canopy and a high ash juniper content. So the hiking
very specific.
Yeah, very, very specific. And so the hiking around in those areas is not always easy going. And you're doing this at the crack of dawn, like you're getting there before daylight even happens. And then you're just walking out into a canyon and you're like, I'm about to beat my body for the next 4 hours. And it's so early. And this property in particular, I woke up that morning and I just didn't feel great. And I was like, I'm a little queasy, could be really bad. But I got my stuff and I left and I was just like, get there, get the thing done, get home. And then you can go into your cave. Yeah, go into your cave for the rest of the day and recover, right? So I get on site, I start moving through, and I'm like, I'm not feeling any better, and it's really hot and muggy, and the mosquitoes are eating me alive, and I was not present, right? I had it. I was like, I'm tired, I'll go home. And so I had hiked up this hilltop, and when I got to the top, I was like, I gotta take a breather. So I kind of sat down for a second, and I'm listening for golden cheeks, trying to still be aware and present. And I don't hear any golden cheeks, but what I do hear is something that sounds kind of like a northern parula, which is common at that time of year in those areas. They overlap in habitat, right? So it's not rare that I would hear or see that. And there was something though that stuck out. It's kind of like in birding, when you learn identification, you can learn it visually or auditory, right? So if you're listening to calls and learning how to ID on calls, in my head at least, this is the way I organize it, birds tend to have a voice. So, same concept of if I were to ever hear my mom's voice, I always know my mom's voice.
Yeah.
I've been listening to that voice my whole life. And so the more and more that you listen to these individual birds, the way that they sound, they have these unique voices. And so when I'm sitting here listening to what I think is a northern parula, I'm like, that's just not quite right. It's not spot on. And there's something different. Maybe it's young. Maybe it's still fumbling its way through its call. I don't know. Maybe it has had a bad morning like me. I really don't know. So I get my binoculars up and I'm scanning the treetops and I'm kind of like, I'm going to find this bird that's making the noise, right? So I find the bird. There it is, making the call, focus in on it. And it's not a northern parula. It's way more vibrant. The color is everywhere, and it's got kind of this orangey or rusty, necklace sort of thing on its chest, right on its breast. And so I'm sitting there looking at a tropical parula, which is a really rare bird. You just don't get it in central Texas. It's rare in Texas to begin with. It's really only found in the tip of Texas, and that's because it's a Central and South American bird. And it's not something I would have ever expected where I was, right?
Yeah, in the middle of Travis County.
So I'm literally so sweaty, being actively eaten alive, drained all of the blood from me by these mosquitoes. I've got a spider stuck to me in a spider web. I'm not looking great. I'm not feeling great. And I'm standing here looking at this magnificent thing that I probably I would be lucky if I ever had a chance to see it again in real life, right? So this is probably my once in a lifetime experience. And in the bird world, we call this a lifer or a life bird, in which you would see a new species for the first time in your life. And this was a life bird moment for me. So me being a tender-hearted person and maybe on this more sensitive side of things, I of course start crying. I was lucky enough to be able to get a picture of it through my binoculars, which if you've ever done this, it's really hard. It's really hard, and I'm terrible at it. So I've gotten like 2 successful pictures in all of my years of birding through binoculars, and this happened to be one of them. So it's male tropical parula sitting at the top of the tree. I texted my coworkers, and I'm like, you will never believe. And speaking of coworkers, Mark Gray, of course, responded immediately and was like, I need picture proof. Like, I don't believe you. So I had a picture to send, and I was like, bam, take that. So it was just that really special moment that was just there for me. I didn't have to share it with anybody. And that there was something that I was like, okay, actually, I feel really good today. Like the queasiness is gone. I don't care if I have like 27 whelps from mosquito bites. Like today is
I still have to finish the survey, so I have to walk back through all that breath I just walked through.
I have to push my way back through all the spider webs and the sticks that are like just waiting to poke your eye out. And I did it all, and it was a great day. So I think that's one story. We all have these stories, right?
For sure. We all have.
So many of them.
Yeah, there's always something that happens, be that good or bad.
Yeah.
We've had plenty of ones where something bad happens.
Yeah.
You show up to the wrong property, or you fall into the pond.
Yeah, you get really lost. You lose your car. I've lost my car on properties, like in tall ragweed, and I had like a shorter SUV at the time. So now I like mark my location of my car, because I'm like, what if I just wander around for hours?
Yeah.
And I can never leave.
The good news is mostly the areas that you work, there are some big properties here, but you can find a fence line. You can walk.
Usually.
Hopefully you can find a city.
Or
maybe
a road.
House, somebody at some point in time that'll come save you.
Sure.
But it definitely happens. That's one of I guess one of the fun parts of being a wildlife biologist. Every day's a new day. You never know what's going to happen, which is great. I think that's what makes my job interesting and our job interesting is you never know what you're going to run into, what's going to happen. So I think we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about careers and talking about the wildlife biology career. Some of our younger listeners that are out there wanting to go into this path. I think for myself, I find a lot of passion to help those younger students and get them prepared for this career, mostly because I want to retire someday.
Yeah.
That's my goal. So I want to be able to hand this to somebody and have confidence that they understand what they're doing. And again, it's a hard career. We've been doing this for 10, 15 years now. And we've got folks that have been doing it for 20, 25, even more. And it's one of those things that we still learn new stuff every day. You're not going to know it all.
No.
And that's a huge misconception inside of our own industry sometimes, is that, hey, we're going to know it all. And I think it's okay to not.
Nope.
And so with that being said, is there any piece of advice, snidbits of advice that you might have for some of our younger listeners, or for folks that are maybe looking at this as a career path for themselves? What's maybe that one key thing or 2 key things that you've learned over your career?
Sure. Yeah. So I think I'll frame it kind of in this way, because I think my brain processes it a little bit easier. But maybe like, what would I have told myself as like a little baby Kyndal biologist? I think that what I would tell myself is to not discount or undervalue your experiences and your knowledge. I think that within this field, you are likely to meet a lot of people who have a lot more experience, field experience, educational experience, professional experience than you have. And it's easy to kind of get down on yourself or go, oh my gosh, I know so little compared to this person. Like I just talked to this person and they're a genius, and it's easy to find myself kind of feeling that way sometimes because I don't come to wildlife biology from a traditional route. And so I think that would be my recommendation to value your own experiences and your own knowledge base, because it's immeasurable in that value, and there's a niche for you anywhere. So maybe that's advice for young biologists that are just coming into that. Maybe that's advice for current biologists that have been in this for a little bit, to really take stock of what you know and what you've experienced, and know that there's a place for you and that there's high value in where you come from.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we try to do here at Plateau with a lot of our biologists. Is biologists come to Plateau with their own passion, their own thing.
Yeah.
I'm not the birder.
Right.
I struggle to get the passion to be motivated to learn more about birds.
Yeah.
It's hard for me, but I have other passions and other things that I really care about. Danielle's another good example here at Plateau.
Yeah.
She's got a passion for birding, and she goes with that, and
she's crazy good at it.
Yeah, she's awesome at it. So I think that's the other kind of side to that, is it's okay to have a passion and really focus in on that. Try to expand your horizons a little bit, get some more experience in other places. And then it's totally okay to also be the jack of all trades.
Yeah.
You may not be an expert at it, but you at least have some experience in it. You can provide some feedback, and that's just going to come with time.
Yeah.
You're going to gain more experiences, learn more about stuff. Again, and that's the fun part of our job, is that every day is something new. You're always going to learn something.
Yeah.
And
that's part of the draw to it. At least for me, it's you're constantly building your knowledge base. So where I was 14 years ago and what I knew about nature and open space land, I've changed so much. I've come so far in my knowledge base. And so those opportunities are out there. That's out there for you as a new biologist, or even somebody in the field. I think, because I've lived it.
Yeah, well, and then for us, like, there's other things that Plateau does that are a little bit different than the traditional biology. We're all property tax consultants.
Yeah.
So we've got that, which you may not agree with me that that's the very interesting and fun stuff.
Oh my gosh. No.
But I something I find interesting, but it's, again, we all have some experience in it. We use that to our advantage all the time. Mark Gray, for example, we've talked about multiple times on this podcast, but he's been doing property tax consulting, and Shane Kiefer both, property tax consulting for many, many years.
Yeah.
Longer than I think both of us have worked at Plateau. They've been doing property tax consulting. And that's a very unique, very niche thing that requires a lot of understanding of what's going on, some understanding of how to read laws, how to understand legislation. Fun stuff, stuff that makes you really excited to read about it.
Yeah, feel like an attorney without being an attorney. I went to school to learn grasses and trees and shrubs and animals, and here I am literally reading law, interpreting it, and then going and arguing it at an appraisal review board hearing, and it's a lot.
Yeah,
it's not who I am to my core.
No, for sure. And I think that's really that's something that you never know what's going to pop up in your career that you may need to learn about, and you may need to. So take advantage of those situations when they pop up. It's definitely made me more well-rounded as a wildlife biologist, because I can have that conversation now with a landowner.
Yep.
You never know what's going to pop up in those conversations. So
agreed.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you for being here today. This has been wonderful, having this conversation, talking about being a biologist. We both came from A&M, so I'd like to point that out to the listeners out there.
You have much more school spirit.
Yeah.
You wore maroon
Friday,
today.
Yeah, it's Friday before a football game, so I have to.
Know where my Aggie ring is
no,
currently.
don't say that.
So sorry, Mom and Dad.
Thank you for being here. I think this has been great. Talking about the wildlife biologist field. I don't think we do that often enough.
No.
With folks. I'm glad we've got a platform to do that here at Your Texas Land podcast, where we can talk about what we do on a daily basis. I think sometimes it's often not understood by folks that aren't wildlife biologists what goes on in this field. So thank you for being here. This has been great. That's going to be a wrap for today's episode of Your Texas Land. We hope you enjoyed hearing more about the wildlife biology field and how we kind of our daily experiences out there working with private landowners. Thank you, Kyndal, again for joining us today. Is there anything you want to share? Is there anything else? Is there
No.
something I missed?
No, I don't think, I think you covered it. I'm just really grateful to be here and be able to come on and talk to you. And like I said, it's rare that we get to have these chats face to face, especially, but it's always good to be able to kind of reconnect with what I do. So it's not just the daily grind.
Perfect. Well, until next time, keep being an advocate for Texas land. Thanks for listening.